Okay, everybody, this is my second game against Martin. This time I'm going to take the black pieces, and you'll see this little icon here at the bottom of the screen in case you want to click the black king, and that way you have the black pieces. And yeah, here's game 2 against Martin. How will Martin open the game? E4. Okay, so in our first game, I played E4. Martin responded with E5, planting a flag in the mountain. Fair enough. I'll do the same. What is he going to play next? Okay, knight C3. Good developing move. Controlling the center, but I don't see any threats. So I'll bring out my knight. Just, developing a piece supporting the center. And he responds in kind, developing another knight. And this time the knight is threatening to capture the pawn. Hey, even Martin points out here, this is the moment I tell my kids to pay attention. Well, fair enough. The pawn is under threat. So new move, new piece. I want to develop another piece and support the pawn. I could move my bishop, not a horrible move, but the bishop feels a little blocked that way. So I'll just bring out my other knight. Okay, the 4 knights opening. How did that name ever come to be? Okay, he plays bishop to b5, put some pressure against my knight. And let's say that I get a little worried, right? That if they take my knight, then nothing's guarding my pawn. So if I get a little nervous, maybe I'll just push my pawn here and create a pawn chain and support my pawn. Okay, he takes, attacking my king. Of course, I don't want to give my opponent my knight for free, so I'll recapture. And so far, so good. Even material. And now, knight d4. What is Martin up to here? Well, if I look at the forward squares, here, nothing really going on, nothing going on there. Aha, Martin is threatening the pawn. Now, when you're playing, it's all too easy to say, okay, my pawn is hanging, I'm going to push it, or I'm going to defend it somehow. But remember, we're looking for not just the new options for your opponent, that is, there's a new capture here for the white knight. Is there another capture for us, a new capture? The knight was here, now it moved to d4, and indeed, it's actually in capturing distance of our pawn. So that's a free knight. I'm going to take it just like that. And now I'm threatening this knight as well, right there. And Martin plays h3, a luxurious pawn move, wasting time. Doesn't really help develop anything. And Martin didn't ask, what is my opponent going to do next? And in this case, I'm going to take that knight just like this. So this pawn has lived quite a charmed life. Okay, now it's captured, fair enough. And here we have to be careful. So far, I've been talking a lot about looking for free stuff and just taking free stuff, right? And in fact, we did that by basically winning 2 knights in exchange for a single pawn. Not a bad deal. Now here I'm noticing I could capture this pawn. And although it appears free, one thing that makes me a little bit nervous is my king is still in the middle. And so before you clear the e-file of pawns, take a look at where the kings are. And I would much rather get my king to safety, and then we can talk about taking that pawn. Because if I take this pawn immediately, maybe Martin could pin the knight to my king with queen e2. And although I can defend, I'm not sure about that. I think I'm okay. But the other thing is, after taking, maybe Martin would just castle and say, okay, I'm going to move my rook down the open e-file in the next move and create some problems. So here I think we're up a lot of material. I don't want to expose my king. So I'm going to develop a piece, shield my king, and prepare to castle. So that is my game plan. I'll probably castle on the next move. Okay, good move by Martin. He defends his pawn, and he opens up a diagonal for the bishop. Pawns open windows for pieces, so I want to be really aware of what that bishop is looking at. No threats, so let's castle. So far, so good. And Martin makes another luxurious pawn move. Why do I call it luxurious? Meaning you don't really need to push this pawn. You don't want to waste time. In the opening, we want to control the center. We want to develop pieces. And you don't really want to waste time with pawn moves unless you have like a really clear reason. So what am I going to do here? I think there's a number of good moves. I'm going to, well, let's just say develop another piece. How shall I do it? Well, I'm going to play just bishop e6, just make a bishop move, get it out into the game. Okay, so he plays rook to b1, open file, rooks love that, and maybe it could land down here, try to cause a little chaos, but, nothing's really in danger. Now, remember, I'm up 2 pieces. I see that we both have a dark squared bishop, but I have an extra knight and an extra light squared bishop. So I'm happy to trade. When you're up a lot of material, you can encourage fair trades because they're not really fair. I'm up a lot of material, so if we keep trading, I'm going to have more pieces in the endgame. So this rook is really active. I find it annoying. So I'm going to offer a trade, rook b8, and say, okay, let's trade rooks. And Martin says, no, I'm just going to move my rook. And if you're going to do that, by the way, I should mention, when you're learning how to castle online, move the king first and move it here and let go on that square. Then the rook will castle over. But if you play your rook here first, well, that's a rook move. So always, whether it's online or especially over the board, touch your king first, move it to its castling square, and then the rook will do its thing. So this move doesn't make any sense. And one thing about bots, they're not going to play the most sensible moves all the time, but it's really good training to work on target practice, right? Keeping your material safe, your pieces safe, and accepting your opponent's gifts. So I offered to trade a rooks. I thought he was going to take, and then I would take back with my queen. But instead, we get to go bowling down the b file. I'll take that rook there, pinning the bishop to the queen. Okay, Martin moves his king. Bold move. I don't see how that threatens anything. And I don't know. Overall, I'm feeling pretty good. So I have an idea. My bishop is currently blocked. Imagine if my bishop could just jump over this pawn and go all the way here to a3, like that. Okay, it's not a legal move, but I'm just dreaming. And this goes into, well, game 1 against Martin. Put pressure on the pinned pieces or pawns. Here the bishop is pinned to the queen, so if my pawn can just jump over, or if my bishop can just jump over the pawn, I'll then have 2 attackers against that pinned bishop. So I'm going to strike in the center. I'm going to plant a new flag in the mountain and attack this pawn here and open a window for my bishop like that. Okay, I had a plan. I was going to move my bishop here. I still like that idea, but before I quickly continue with my plan, I always ask, what would my opponent play next? Remember, my pawn did a whole bunch of damage, capturing 2 knights. Now Martin's kind of trying to take a page out of our own playbook here, pushing the pawn forward to do what? A 1-point pawn attacking our 3-point knight. So before I continue with my dream, let's not give Martin anything for free. Do not keep your opponent optimistic in any way. So what I'm going to do is move my knight. Where? Well, the forward squares are dominated by pawns. Don't want to lose my knight there by either of the pawns. Knight here could be a little tricky, trying to attack the king with check, but I don't like moving my knight to the edge of the board. And as the pawn moves forward, it's a little bit loose. Nothing's protecting it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my knight to safety, and I'm going to threaten this pawn all in one move. So now I'm ready to take that pawn, if allowed. Okay, here we go. The bishop jumps into the action, and I'm seeing, hey, I have a bishop and a queen, right? A queen-bishop battery, 2 attackers against 0 defenders. The bishop is hanging, right? This is what we call tunnel vision. I'm really excited by the bishop moving here. I'm noticing it's threatening my bishop, but that diagonal, well, it goes in 2 directions. Now, before I commit to taking the bishop, I remember when I went to the chess club as a kid, I was told to sit on my hands, right? It's so tempting to capture this bishop, but hang on a minute. If I go back, 1 move, and you can do that, by the way, you're playing bots, just hit the back arrow. Ask yourself, what's changed? The bishop moving here creates a crisis on g5 and e7, I get that, but that bishop was pinned. So notice, if I only focus on the bishop here, capturing a 3-point piece, I might give up my 5-point rook. Not a favorable trade. So by looking at all of the new captures, I see the bishop threatening to capture my bishop. That's new capture number 1. Number 2 is my bishop threatening its rival there. But number 3, less obvious, the queen is attacking the rook, our rook. And the 4th new capture, this capture on the first rank, well, it goes in 2 directions. If the queen can capture our rook, well, our rook worth 5 can capture the queen worth 9. So very happy to make that trade. And now Martin plays c4. Okay. Attacking our pawn, allowing this capture. I still could capture this bishop. But hey, look at that. My rook is still hanging. Well, equal trades are no longer equal when you're up tons and tons of material. So let's get rid of the rook there and see what he does in response. f4. Wow. Okay, so he is defending his bishop, but my rook is worth 5 points. So although I want to take the bishop and that would be fine, why don't I just kind of bring my rook to relative safety here? And, I'll attack a pawn. Why not? c3. Okay, so he moves the pawn forward. I could capture it. But before I, kind of try to do my best Pac-Man impersonation and whoop, 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 try to capture all the pawns, let's get rid of the pieces. The only piece remaining for white is the bishop. Let's get rid of it. I'm just trying to simplify the game so I can focus on checkmating the king. Okay, I'm going to awaken my queen. That pawn is hanging, so I'll take it just like that. Now I'm threatening a new pawn, and to Martin's credit, he defends. And so now I'm attacking a pawn, 1 attacker versus 1 defender, the king. Let's invite my rook to the party, attacking the king and X-raying through the king that pawn. Okay, here we go. The rook could capture, attacking the pawn. That's a good move, right? Also would capture the pawn, attack the king. I like that. But on the other hand, when you have 2 ways to capture, right? You have an attacker and a defender. Always flip the roles in your mind. I could, sure, attack with the rook and defend with the queen. Let's flip the script. I will let the rook be the defender, and I'll let the queen be the attacker. And that way, by doing so, I'm attacking the king with the queen. I attack the king, and I protect all those escape squares. And notice the king is unable to capture my queen because the rook is defending the queen. So, quick recap. Good opening by Martin. We played what's known as the 4 knights. Notice each time a knight attacked a pawn, I made it a point to defend. He played bishop b5. Opening theory suggests a number of moves. There's bishop c5, bishop b4. For you grandmasters watching in the audience, knight d4 is a cool move. But the reason I played d6 was I thought, what would my opponent play next? Maybe they would take my knight, and then I would lose this pawn. And because I felt a little nervous just trying to simulate a situation you might encounter in your own games, I thought, hey, why don't I just add an extra defender by playing d6? I created a pawn chain, meaning this pawn is linked to this pawn and that pawn is linked to e5. So all the pawns work together. I open up my bishop, which is great. Okay, dark squared bishop was a little bit restricted by that move, but it has an okay square, and then I'm ready to castle. When your opponent captures something, try not to give them free stuff. So I don't want to block or move my king. I just lost a knight, so I'm down 3 points. Let's regain that material right away, and that's what I did. And after knight d4, I think this is really important. When you're under pressure, it's easy to say, okay, what would they play next? They take my pawn. So we kind of zoom in to that square and think about how to deal with that attack. But we also have to remind ourselves, hang on, there's 63 other squares. What else is going on in the world? And here, by looking at all of the new captures, we looked at Martin's new capture, but we also noted we have a new capture. That knight was hanging. Now I'm threatening the knight. He didn't pay attention to our next move, so we just captured 2 knights for a pawn. Not a bad deal. Other big thing to remember, once you're up lots and lots of material, don't get overly ambitious about gobbling up every pawn, right? I'm already up 2 pieces, meaning I have an extra knight and a bishop in exchange, for that brave pawn. So this pawn isn't going to make or break me. But what could be a problem is if I take that pawn and expose my king early, I don't want to do that because then maybe my opponent will have some chances. So before I open the center, ask your king, how do you feel about that? And the king's like, hey, send me home. Let me get into my castle. Then open the center all you want. So that's what I did. New move, new piece. I developed the bishop. I then castled. A4, kind of a random move. New move, new piece. I developed my bishop toward the center. And then my opponent played rook b1. He started to get active. And because I'm up so much material, equal trades are no longer equal. I want to try to get to that endgame where I have lots of pieces and my opponent has king, some pawns and no hope. So here I offer an equal trade, rook for rook. Martin does not acknowledge what changed in the dynamic. And so I just win a rook for free. Now the rook is pinned. The rook is pinning the bishop to the queen, because if the bishop ever moves, my 5-point piece will happily collect the 9-point piece. And what did Martin do? He moved his king, not great. I played d5. I put some pressure in the center, pawn attacking pawn, and I open up the diagonal there for my bishop because I want to put pressure on the pinned bishop. Now, my opponent pushed the pawn forward, and although I had a good plan, I always want to wonder and understand what could have possibly changed after the last move. And here the answer is my knight's hanging. So I dealt with that threat by moving my knight to safety, and I'm threatening that pawn. And hey, my plan isn't going away. I'm ready to play bishop to a3, put pressure on the pinned bishop, and then white kind of create some chaos here. And again, we have a tendency to zoom in on a certain square. Like, okay, there's a bishop there. I want to take it. Totally makes sense. But before you do it, zoom out. What else is going on? What are all of the new captures? And by recognizing the queen was attacking our rook and that our rook is therefore attacking the queen, we happily made a favorable capture. Martin did not respond. Should probably take our rook. Maybe throw this move in first to attack the queen and then take our rook. But he does neither of those things, puts a little pressure on our center. Well, hey, the last part of the strategy, get these pieces off the board, and then we're only dealing with pawns. So I take the rook. He doesn't take back. I move my rook to safety, attack a pawn. And now I remove white's last piece, the bishop. And then we were able to get a pretty quick checkmate. I captured a pawn. I threatened this pawn. The king tried to defend. I invited another piece to the party, attacking the king and X-raying through the king, that meeting point with the queen on g2. And when the king moved away, the big lesson, one attacker, one defender. Think about that. And then flip the roles before you decide. Now the queen could be the attacker, the rook could be the defender, and hey, that results in checkmate. So that was our second game against Martin, and I will record one more game against Martin, and then we can move on to the next bot. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the third video.